Hello there, future bone doctors. I am Dr. Salauddin and I'm an MS orthopedician. Welcome to Dr. Salauddin's ASAN network, where we make complex orthopedic concepts very ASAN or simple. This is the logo of my network. And welcome to fracture classification series. We are making this series to make the fracture classifications easy to remember for your exams and easy to write in the exams and also for your day-to-day clinical practice. Okay, now today we are dealing with a simple classification starting with our clavicle bone. So coming to the clavicle bone itself, the clavicle bone has three ends, that is the sternal end, the this is the sternal end, this is the shaft, and this is the acromial end. Okay, this is the medial third, middle third, and the lateral third. How this bone fractures? Okay, this bone is not a tubular bone or completely a flat bone. Okay, the medial third, that is the sternal end, is triangular in shape, and the shaft is almost circular, and the lateral third, that is towards the acromial side, it is flattened, and it is the bone marrow is very thin. This you have to keep in mind, that the bone marrow is very thin. That's why the treatment plan also varies for the clavicle bone rather than the other long bones. Okay, so how this bone fractures? It is either you fall directly onto the affected side or the same side shoulder, that is a direct impact, or least common injury is you fall on an outstretched hand. Okay, so whatever may be the injury, whatever may be the mechanism, you have to always look for an injury over the affected side, and also you have to look for the injuries in the sternal end, and if there is any affected shoulder range of motion. So these things you have to rule out. We have to see the normal head to toe examination. We have to look for all the any cervical bone injuries, the sternal end injuries, and also the shoulder or proximal humerus any injuries there or not. Okay, so coming to the clavicle bone is the only bone that acts as an functional bone between your axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So it is the only bone or a link between your axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So if this bone is getting fractured, then the link between your axial and appendicular skeleton is lost, so the function is also lost. That is why it is important to know the classification of these fractures and how we are going to treat it. For this classification, I have made a simple ASAN mnemonic, that is CANE, C-A-N-E. Okay, so each letter depicts a name of the classification. So C means it is Craig's classification, and it is based on combined Neers and Allman's and Neers classification. So the most common classification, the next one is the most common classification that everyone knows, that all the PGs will know. So it is a Allman classification. All men will know the clavicle classification, that is Allman classification, and it is the simple classification based on the location of the fracture. Next comes our Neers classification, which is an extension of Allman's classification towards the acromial and the medial ends. And E stands for the Edinburgh or the Robinson classification, where it is based on displacement and comminution of the clavicle fracture. Okay. Finally, we also include the universal AO classification system, that is based on alphanumerical naming of the bone. Okay, we'll go start with our Allman's classification. So we'll start with our Allman's classification. So Allman is based on the location. As I told you, it is based on the location. So if it is the sternal end or the medial end, the fracture, it is named as the group 3. So group 1 is the central shaft fracture. Middle third, the shaft fractures is the group 1. The acromial end, it is the group 2, or the lateral third is the group 2, and the medial end is the group 3. So the extension of Allman's classification is nothing but our Neers classification. So he extends the group 2 fractures, that is the acromial end fractures and the medial third fractures. The lateral third, he divides them into 5 types. So first type is the subdivision minimally displaced fracture or an interligamentous fracture is type A. Type B is the fracture is displaced medial to the coracoclavicular ligament, and in that type B1 is where the conoid is intact, both the conoid and the trapezoid ligaments are intact, only the fracture is at the medial to the coracoclavicular ligaments. So I will show you the image, you will understand it better. So B2 is either the conoid is torn or both the ligaments are torn. Okay. So type C is the fracture is extending to the articular surface, that is intra-articular fracture, and type D is the fracture is in the children's and intact coracoclavicular ligaments are attached to the periosteal sleeve. So the type 3 or the type D or the fourth type is the ligaments are attached to the periosteal sleeve. So type 5 is a comminuted fracture. So there is a group 2. The medial end is similar. A is minimally displaced, B is displaced, C is intra-articular, D is an epiphyseal separation. So there is epiphyseal separation of the, then we'll make it into group type 4, and E is comminuted fractures. So that is the lateral end type 1 or type A fracture, where the fracture is minimally displaced or it is interligamentous fracture. This type 1 or type A. Type 2 or type B is the fracture is medial. The fracture is just medial to the coracoclavicular ligaments. And if both the ligaments are intact, it is type 2A or type B1. That is the conoid and the trapezoid ligaments are both are intact. Then comes 2B or B2, where conoid is torn or both conoid and the trapezoid may be torn, then it is type B2. Type 3 or type C is intra-articular extension, where the fracture is intra-articular. Then type 4 of lateral end is where we have an fracture in the children. The type 4 is usually seen in the children, and in the coracoclavicular ligaments are intact and they are attached to the periosteal sleeve. They are attached to the periosteal sleeve. So this is a type 4 or type D fracture of the knees. So we'll combine both the Allman's and the Neers classification. We get the Craig's classification. So the Craig is combination of all Allman and the Neers. So Craig, he divided all the three parts of the clavicle, medial end, shaft, and the acromial end. First, coming to the acromial end, he divided into adult fractures and the fractures in the children. So in the adult, same as Neers, the coracoclavicular ligaments and the conoid and the trapezoid both are intact. The conoid is torn and the trapezoid is intact. and the fracture is articular, the intra-articular fracture. These are the three types in the adult. Then in the children, as we have discussed, the fourth type of Neers, where the corococlavicular ligaments are intact and attached to the periosteal sleeve. Then it is the displaced fractures or the comminuted fractures. This is the acromial end. And the medial end fractures, similar to the Neers subdivision, where the fracture is minimally displaced, intra-articular fracture, or and the fourth one is the epiphyseal separation, and then comes the comminuted fracture. Okay, coming to our most important fracture classification, that is Edinburgh classification or the Robinson's classification. This is important in clinical perspective because it gives us the displacement and the comminution of the clavicle fracture. Okay, so he divides medial medial end, shaft and the lateral end into type 1, 2 and 3. So we'll discuss individually. So shaft fractures, it is first the fracture is either undisplaced. Sorry to have you, this one is the image is wrong. So this is an undisplaced fracture. Type 2A2 is angulated fracture. Type B1 is a simple wedge fracture where there is only a small wedge. Where there is a small wedge, that is type 2B1. And if it is a multifragmentary fracture, that is type 2B2. A is nothing but undisplaced and disangulated fractures. So 3 is again divided into type 3, that is the lateral end, acromial end is divided into extra-articular fracture and the intra-articular fracture. So extra-articular fracture where it is undisplaced, and type A2 is displaced fracture. Intra-articular similarly undisplaced and displaced fracture. So this is the comprehensive image where we are showing the Edinburgh classification, that is the cortical alignment in type 2A1 is undisplaced, type 2A2 is where the fracture is angulated, and displaced fracture of type 2B. Type 2B1 where there is a wedge, type 2B2 is multifragmentary or comminuted fracture. This is the comprehensive Edinburgh classification. Now coming to the final classification of this session, that is the AO classification. This is an alphanumerical classification where the numerical number is given for the bone. The clavicle bone has numerical number and each part is given a alphabetical order. See the numbering 1 5 here, 1 5 is for clavicle, and 15.1 151, the 151 part is medial end, 152 is the shaft, 153 is the lateral end. So 151 the medial end and the lateral end have similar, these are articular surfaces. So the classification for the articular, any articular surface of any long bone is similar. A, B, C, where the fracture is extra-articular, partial articular or complete articular or intra-articular fracture. So any articular surface of long bones is divided similarly. The difference comes in the shaft. Sorry. So the difference comes in the shaft, where the shaft is divided into ABC, where there is a simple fracture or a wedge fracture or a multifragmentary or comminuted fracture. So this is a simple universal AO classification for clavicle. The number is 1 5. You need not remember exact numbers for all the bones in the AO system, but for few bones you have to remember, like for femur, humerus, you have to remember those numbering. We'll discuss in the later sessions what number comes to each bone, and we'll discuss comprehensively the AO system. But in the clavicle, the number is 1-5. If you remember this and the articular surfaces and the diaphyseal division, it's enough. So we have a quick recap for classification systems. So the mnemonic is Cane, C-A-N-E, Craig classification, Allman classification, Neers classification, and the Edinburgh classification, and finally the universal AO classification. So Allman classification based on the location. Group 1 is shaft, group 2 is the lateral end, group 3 is the medial end. Okay. So Neers divided the medial end, lateral end and the medial end. So according to Neers, the lateral end is more important because there is coracoclavicular ligaments at the acromial end. So if the coracoclavicular ligaments are intact and the fracture is minimally displaced, it's type 1. The coracoclavicular ligaments or the fracture is medial to the coracoclavicular ligaments, it's type 2. Only the conoid is torn, type 2A1. The conoid and the trapezoid is torn, type 2B2. Okay. And if the fracture is intra-articular, it is type 4. And if the fracture is comminuted, it is type 5. The middle, the children, it has the intact coracoclavicular ligaments and they are attached to the periosteal sleeve. And the medial fractures is minimally displaced, displaced fractures, intra-articular fractures, epiphyseal separation, and comminuted fractures. These are Neers classification. Coming to Craig, you combine all the Allman and Neers classification, it is Craig's classification. Simple. Medial shaft, medial end, and the lateral end. The lateral end, it's the same Neers classification. He has divided into adult and children. Adult is minimally displaced, displaced, and intra-articular fracture. Where the lateral end, he talks about the coracoclavicular ligaments. The conoid is torn and the trapezoid is intact. Both the conoid and the trapezoid are torn. Okay. And in children, it is similar, minimally displaced, displaced, and coracoclavicular ligaments are attached to the periosteal sleeve. That is Craig's classification for lateral end. Medial end, it's similar as the Neers. So all the three classifications, Craig, Allman, and Neer, are simple. Only the difference comes in the Edinburgh classification or the Robinson's classification, where he talks about displacement and comminution. So type 1 is medial, type 2 is shaft, type 3 is the lateral end. So shaft fractures, first type 2, A1 is the fracture is undisplaced. There is only a fracture, it is not displaced. And if it is angulated, it is type 2, A2. So if it is displaced, it is type 2B. So the fracture is displaced. If it is having a wedge, it is type 2 B1. If it is having a multifragmentary, it is type 2 B2. Type 3 is the lateral end. The lateral end and the acromial end. So the type 3 acromial end or the articular, where he divides into extra-articular and intra-articular. Extra-articular undisplaced fracture, extra-articular displaced fracture. Intra-articular undisplaced fracture and intra-articular displaced fracture. This is the Edinburgh classification. So I hope I have made your clavicular fracture classification simple or ASAN, and I hope so I have made it. If you like this video, please like, share to your colleagues and help them remember this clavicle fracture in an ASAN manner, and please subscribe to ASAN Network Ortho Memorizer. Thank you. Signing off, your Dr. Salauddin. Thank you. Please like and share, subscribe and share to this channel, because it helps me and motivates me to create more videos and help you guys in your future endeavors. Thank you one and all.